in Manhattan. It was like the same Ritz Hotel that went on for years, but it kind of went and got together and was done. So recently in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn,
That is true, especially in construction, Barry.
in construction, and I know a lot of people are understaffed in construction. They don't have enough workers.
Right.
So the contractor may have 5 projects. Hello, can I have you come tomorrow? There were no women
The women.
on a construction site.
Right.
And I was involved with the build. No one. And people used to joke on the job, the people I work with, construction site's like a prison because it's all men and it's all dirty and filthy.
Why are you ladies
and
here?
other
Right.
things. Thank you. So nice for you to have me out, Lisa.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it so much.
You're welcome.
My name is Barry Schmidt. My company is Schmidt Construction Consulting. So I am a construction consultant. I help owners of construction projects get better outcomes with their projects.
Okay.
A lot of times there's mistakes, delays, overruns, things aren't planned. There's always something that's going wrong. And if an owner could bring in a professional project manager, potentially could save them a lot of money. So I've been doing that on my own for over 20 years. And
New York City, to be exact.
Yes, New York City based. I'll go around, tri-state area, but it's New York City based.
Okay.
And I was a professional in the business for like 15 years before that.
Okay.
So I've been around.
Well, Barry, let's get right into it. Now, construction in New York City, what is the process of doing construction in New York City versus these other markets? Just tell the viewers what that looks like from your end.
So I guess it's from the owner's perspective, or the investor wants to build a building. But there's a lot of regulation, starting with the zoning. If they want to buy a piece of property, they have to understand what the zoning is. And usually that means they have to have an architect who understands.
Right.
And sometimes people make mistakes. And from my point of view, the owner really needs to do his homework up front and figure out how much money he's going to make on it before he ever buys. Because you find out later that I can't do this, I can't do that. It could really hurt his time and all the money he put. And we have the building department here. There's a lot of filing.
Absolutely.
It takes a long time to prepare documents for filing, and a lot of times they don't get accepted the first time. So an owner can hire an architect. They could spend 3-4 months drawing drawings and submit it for approval. And sometimes they're not 100% correct anyway because it's so complicated, and they won't get a review for 2, 3, 4 months.
And that can hold off on
And then
that.
it comes back
process.
rejected.
Wow.
You got to do it again. So that's 8 months that you thought you were going to have an approval. So I think it's really important for an owner to stay on top of that and have the right people and not take it for granted.
Now, don't forget to download my new ebook where I'll be providing the simplest steps on how to safeguard your critical documents through a loan signing after you close on your residential or investment property. Don't forget to download in the description bar below. Thank you so much for your support. Now back to this episode. Which segues into our next question. Let's go into about New York City and the zoning laws, Barry. Can you elaborate on what those zoning laws are like in New York City, what those steps are, and what do we, like the building code? This process.
There's so much. The building code tells you what physically you have to do to make a building, and the zoning tells you how big it can be and what kind of building. So you're probably aware there's a housing shortage in New York City. They've been calling it a housing crisis.
I didn't know that.
You know why? It's been that 100% of the time since I started. I don't want to tell you how many years ago, but it's getting worse. It's more aggravating. So the zoning says I can build residential here, but I can only build commercial there.
Right.
And a lot of the zoning now is out of date. There's a lot of old school manufacturing that's empty and commercial since COVID. And it really needs to be changed to residential so people can build residential there.
Okay.
And it isn't. And that's it's very political. So that's one thing that's important, because then imagine if they change the zoning and they're doing it piece by piece. A huge swath of land, like Flushing was rezoned 10 years ago.
Okay.
All of a sudden,
Flushing, Queens,
right where we are at City Field and the surrounding area.
Right.
And all of a sudden there's a ton of development here that never was before because it wasn't allowed. So the city, that's the law. You can only build this, you can only build it this high.
Right.
Why not make it this high? Because there's not enough room for houses.
That's so true. And you see how Queens now is expanding. Because you remember, when I wanted to ask you the difference between Brooklyn zoning laws and Manhattan and now Queens, which borough you think would be the easiest, or is it such a thing? We all pretty much equal on that playing field.
Yeah, I think the laws are the same everywhere. But plots of land are categorized to a zoning category. So the zoning categories in New York and Manhattan are more restrictive because
Okay.
people didn't want to mess with it. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, now it's already 20 plus years, Queens, the Bronx, people, they wanted to revitalize, so they changed the zoning. So it's easier out in the Bronx. Everything's more difficult in Manhattan.
Right.
And dealing with the bureaucracy is more difficult because there's so many people and you have to wait a lot longer on the lines. And you have some big companies there, and it's just everything takes long.
That's definitely true. Now, here's my next question for you. Now, what's the typical cost for construction process, especially in New York City? What can the projects range from? I know that's a broad question, but
It's a very
give
broad question.
give me an example of what a typical
Yeah, and
price
one of
range.
the things I teach so to speak to owners is don't just follow the cookie cutter, because a lot of people will say residential multifamily building will be $300 a square foot.
Right.
So if it's 300, it's 100,000 square feet, it's 300,000. If I'm doing the math right, or 3 million, 30 million, whatever the number is.
Right.
But each building is different. Some, you know,
The layout is different.
right. I could build a
Give
building.
me an example, like a 30 square feet. What is
I
that? Like
could build 5,000 and
Yeah.
5,000 out of 10,000 square foot building.
Okay.
Or I could build one of those things on 57th Street, 59th Street. That's 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, going all the way up
So
to
that's
here.
how it works.
And
Okay.
this one's going to be a lot cheaper per square foot than this one up here with the big elevator, and every floor is this big and everything's granted.
And yet we keep building. We're
Right.
building up.
So the builder has to understand, okay, it's not always 300 a foot. It's not always 20. Like I said with the zoning, before you even buy it, I even say before you're interested in a property, before you even put in an offer, pass it by an architect and pass it by someone like myself or a construction company who can assess the drawings. So the architect says you can build so much. They call it an envelope, a massing diagram they could do on an envelope or a napkin.
Okay.
And someone could say, all right, I think it's going to be so much, so much. And then it may not be 200, it may be 400, it may be 100.
Wow.
So I think for a good investor to understand, they could say no on the things that could be too expensive.
Okay.
And yes, on the things that maybe aren't going to be so expensive, but they have to do their homework.
Which segues to my next question. What has been the longest construction project you have ever been on in New York City? I know you got experience.
That's
with
a
that.
loaded question.
Yeah. You seen it where you had to come back and there was always something. I mean, I know that doesn't exist in New York. I'm just being sarcastic.
wanna-
But I know it does.
Well, no, you're not,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have a job.
I know, right? But just if you can expound on it.
Right, because
Yeah.
it's very hard to finish.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of normal constructions, I worked on some very big projects.
Okay.
Before I was
Which
doing
boroughs?
this. In Manhattan. It was like the St. Moritz Hotel that went on for years, but it kind of went and got together and was done. So recently in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, for example,
Okay, my borough.
it's
Okay.
in a borough,
Right.
and we renovated a landmark movie theater.
You know how Landmark is. You know how
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to. You don't know how longer that's going to take.
Yeah, I know.
That alone set, the schedule back 6 to 9 months because the people who started doing it didn't understand how long it was going to take.
Yeah.
So that project never wanted to end. And it literally went on for years and years and years. And in terms of my involvement, there was a hiatus. Matter of fact, there was a mistake in the architectural drawings. It was approved incorrectly.
Wow. So that
And we
can go
found it.
through. And did you guys catch it in time or?
Who was responsible at the end of the day? The owner and the architect. So actually, we caught it
Okay.
before construction, but after it was approved and after landmarks approved it. So
Yeah.
he said, "Whoa, we got a lawyer." He says, "You can't build this because one day someone's going to see this." Because it had to do with stuff sticking out onto the sidewalk, which anybody could notice walking by. You'll get sued and your building will close. So you have to fix it now.
Right.
So we had to stop, go back to the drawing board. That's part of why it was so long. And it was like another year. Redraw it, go back to landmarks, go back. Okay, we have a construction company. Can we keep them busy? Yeah, we kept them busy for a year, but we couldn't finish.
Because it was
So
always
that made it
something
even
added to
more
it.
expensive, right? And then they kept adding and adding.
Yeah.
So one of the things I say to my clients or the owners is, decide at the beginning exactly what you want for the most part and make a commitment to the colors, how the floor looks, the layout you've talked about, how many apartments, is it condos, is it rentals, is it going to be retail?
Right.
Make that decision and stick to it, hopefully, unless there's a big problem. And then it'll get done quicker and cheaper because it won't be stopped constantly and changing everything.
Yeah, that's definitely a plus, Barry. Which segues to my next question. Now, since this pandemic, how has, when it comes with your construction company, material, human capital, what has been the challenges you have encountered or have you not encountered, and business is still going as expected? What has been, your experience so far?
For me as a business owner, and I had aspirations when I started 20 years ago, making it bigger. And there's a time I tried to expand.
Right.
And the human resource, human capital issue for me as a small business person at that time was cumbersome. And I decided kind of keep it small and bring on help when I needed, which is now the model.
Right.
And it wasn't the model 20 years ago.
Okay, so you was ahead of it.
I was ahead of it out of necessity, not because I said I'm going to start a business out of my laptop and work virtual or remote. But yeah, I had an office. It became cost prohibitive. There was so much in the rent and salaries and paperwork. I pulled back and I said, okay, in the future, when I get big enough, I'll do it.
Right.
And it never made sense for me personally, for whatever my lifestyle, my business way of doing things, that I kept it small. But it is expensive. People have to be very careful hiring the right people.
That is true, especially in construction, Barry.
In construction. You know, and I know a lot of people are understaffed in construction. They don't have enough workers.
Right.
So the contractor may have 5 projects. Hello, can I have you come tomorrow? Yeah, but he won't come for 2 weeks because he only has 5 workers and they're on 5 different buildings all over Brooklyn, as an example. So human capital, it's expensive. It's hard to find good people.
Good people.
And
qualified good people.
Yeah,
Barry.
because then they can cost the owner a lot of money if they're not qualified.
I think it's labor issues too, like getting those union cards. You think that all plays a factor, especially in our city. And it's and you can get in trouble now. You get these fines. It's not worth it. What are your thoughts?
You bring up union. I mean, I know thought of this earlier. When I started in the 80s, and it was mostly in Manhattan, every project was union. Every project was union. And so all the workers were union, and they had to be qualified in the union and part of the union. So at some point that changed, which I think was a good thing.
Okay.
And you've talked about inclusivity. It was not very inclusive in those days because there were only certain people historically in certain unions at that time and before.
That's true.
And then a lot of that was challenged in the 90s, kind of, and then it opened up. And now non-union. So the owners of construction companies now do not have to hire union people. So it's controversial. Some people say they're not as well trained and they don't get paid as much. And then the other person
it's high risk too, Barry, because something happens. They rather take that risk, I guess, for low labor, right?
Some do, some don't. The owners don't want to pay, the premium. And a lot of workers can't get into that hurdle, overcome that obstacle to join the union. So in another way, if a good construction company hires a person, they're not in the union and they're trained on the job and they're good people and good workers, they can get a job where 10, 20, 30 years that they never could get a job.
Wow.
So actually unions in terms of the private construction, except for like the central Manhattan 80-story buildings and a lot of government projects are not union anymore. And I think if someone calls me, I'm an investor in Brooklyn,
that's unfortunate.
they are not going to want to build union, and they're not going to build union because no one's going to pay for it. And these days, even the union doesn't expect it anymore. And they're not going to challenge it. Whereas even 15 years ago, they may have challenged.
Which takes me to my next question, diversity. How important is diversity to you, especially in this new era, 2023? Everybody, collaboration, how important to you is diversity? Is it needed? Especially we live in this melting pot, 5 boroughs,
right?
All backgrounds, we all come together. How important is diversity to you, Barry?
I think it's important because, like I said, in those days, there were not only a union, there were no women.
No women.
On a construction site.
Right.
And I was involved with the build. No one. And people used to joke in our, on the job, the people I work with, construction site's like a prison. Because it's all men and it's all dirty and filthy.
Why are you ladies
and
here?
other
right.
things.
Yeah.
And then kind of the same time, all of a sudden there was women.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the rules relaxed. It became more inclusive. And then
which is good.
Right? Yes, because then what good is it only hiring certain people? And then all these other people have talent.
Right.
And you can't utilize their skills.
Right.
So it really is not a good thing. So diversity is important. It's super important. I think people have to get trained so they do a good job.
And get adjusted to it.
Right.
Especially in this age, I think we have to be aware. I believe sometimes they feel like, construction is dirty. It's a man's job, and I get that. But there's a place that women and even, other women of different backgrounds can play a role, because construction, it's a lot of money.
It's true. Not too many years ago, there were no women flying in combat or in the combat in the Marines, right?
Yeah.
Now there are.
So that shows you
So-
times are changing.
Right, times have changed, and it changed in construction too. And there are jobs women can do.
Yeah,
There are
I
definitely
think it's
jobs.
good. If you look in New York, you drive across the 5 boroughs in Brooklyn, I see women now. I'm like, they got the
Right,
flags
did
up.
the flag. You never
And
would have saw that in the 80s, 70s.
You know, and I was like, okay, I just make sure when I'm driving that, you know, pay attention because these ladies like we're, so, you know, you have to respect it. And I think it's a good thing and hopefully it evolves and it gets better.
I think it has been, and then we get there's a lot of focus on it, and
Yeah.
we're going to make further progress.
Absolutely. Now, Barry, now everyone, if they wanted to find you and reach out to you and find out more about the construction company, please tell them, the viewers, how they can connect with these.
Well, my phone number, it's very easy to catch me there, 212
Okay.
495 9117.
Are you on any
Internet.
socials right now?
Yes. LinkedIn, you can type my name, Barry Schmidt, Schmidt Construction Consulting, or my website, www.schmidtconcon.com. So it's Schmidt, C-O-N-C-O-N, construction consultant.
Got it.
.com.
And also, too, Barry, we're going to also put all your information up in under the channel so we get this content out there.
Super
People can
awesome.
reach out to you. Barry, thank you so much. I appreciate it.